had. And she said, but next time you're down the club, can I buy a scarf? And I went straight out the front of the library and picked it up for her. She was amazed. She was like, what else do you have in the boot of your car that's Bedford Town related?
Hello and welcome to the footballing podcast To The Point with myself, Sam, and as always, my good friend Matt, who's living in Canada and is a youth coach. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And today we are joined by a very special guest. He is Secretary of Bedford Town Football Club, our hometown. It's James Smiles. How are you doing, James?
Hey, not too bad, Stan. Not too bad at all.
Brilliant, fantastic. And also thank you to you for joining in, listening at home, and let's kick this off. So, welcome to the podcast. This week we're going to focus on non-league teams and how COVID, this is the second part of our COVID and Clubs series. We're going to focus on Bedford Town Football Club in a short while, but also non-league teams as well. But first of all, Matt, I just want to ask you, because this week it's come to light that the Premier League are, going to be doing Project Restart. And there's a question around that about concluding seasons, the football season, and how does that look? So in terms of the approach, what would be the best approach? Is there a good approach for this?
It's a great question, isn't it, really? Is there a good approach to this? I've seen a lot of different things being mentioned, like possibilities, and I saw one yesterday from Craig Burley, if anyone remembers that name, who said that Liverpool should be awarded the title. There should be no relegation from the Premier League, and the two teams in the automatic promotion place in the Championship should come up, and the rest of the league should be decided on a points per game basis, like they did for Liga 1. Now, that's just, to me, that's just complete insanity. You can't award the Premier League title to a team and let stand and then not relegate teams that are in the relegation. You can't pick and choose what's going to stand if you cancel the season, what doesn't. Either it all stands or it all doesn't. So if you want it to stand, play the season, and if you're going to cancel the season, sorry, the season's void. There's nothing. You can't do anything about it. It's just the situation we're in.
James, do you think there's a good way that we could, as a footballing community, conclude seasons, wrap things up, or is it going to be the ultimate voiding of this season?
I think it's very difficult. For starters, my heart disagrees with Matt completely there. As a Villa fan, obviously, I need to stay up, so non-relegation is perfect for me. But from going to actual the integrity of competitions, it's got to be one way or another. So null and void is the simple option because it puts you in a position whereby it doesn't matter, it never happened, it non-existed. But then we all know that there's kicking a ball around on the pitch, and then there's the sport business impact. And there is a lot of money being spent by clubs from top to bottom in this country, all through the Premier League and non-league, whereby you then get into a situation whereby they've spent money on something with no return. And that's the real headache that they've got here, is the business impact of the money that's been spent. So the simple answer is I've thought long and hard about this. I don't think there's a right answer. You're always going to end up with a loser in this field, whether you're in the Premier League or non-league, and how they come to it is a very difficult one. And I think if it had been more of a defined situation, we'd have known a period of time. They'd have just put everything on hold and restarted. But the knock-on effect for next season, the Qatar World Cup, everywhere you go is just not possible on that front.
Because John Barnes this week on Twitter said that we should be looking at maybe restarting this season in the middle of what would be the starting point of next season, and essentially playing games from the rest of this season into next season whilst the next season is going on as well, which to me sounds complicated. But if you are, for example, a Liverpool fan you're going to want that to happen potentially because you want to win the league. Like you say, James, it's extremely difficult to please everyone in this situation. But I think first and foremost, player safety has to be the key here, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at it from a human point of view, it doesn't matter what position you're in, how much you earn, whether you're a footballer. There is safety got to be in at the heart of everyone's response to this. And I think that's why the Premier League put out that statement yesterday, and they're very clear that they will only restart first and foremost when they deem it safe, and secondly, when the government supports it. So we're not going to see a return in even behind closed doors until every box that are on their list, their 5, whatever they're looking into for releasing lockdown side of things, is ticked. And that's paramount importance. And that's why obviously the model we come back with Project Restart is still very vague.
Dr. Michel Dehuge is the chairman of the FIFA Medical Committee. Earlier this week, he said that no football should be played until September. I mean, does him and his committee, FIFA, do they have any overarching sort of control over the leagues? I mean, if he is saying that and he is the chairman of the committee, shouldn't the Premier League, shouldn't Bundesliga, all these other leagues that want to carry on, shouldn't they take heed of that warning?
I would say so. I think you've got to end up in a situation whereby people are listening to the advice that's given out to them. But it just goes to highlight, as we've seen with COVID responses across society as a whole, there's a structure problem with how we normally live our lives. And that's certainly the case with football, because the Premier League, they work with the FA, but of course they're two different bodies. So you've got contrasting sometimes opinions and governing matters there. And there's no difference there to FIFA, to UEFA. There's different people laying different ground rules down at all times. We find that at non-league level. We find it within the game here, and it'll be the case. I'm sure it'll be the case that certain places restart up, certain places wait and go differently. You know, it's going to be a very interesting, but I do expect it to be an individual decision based on individual countries' governments and stuff like that.
Well, I just think there needs to be a blanket statement from UEFA saying, sorry, we're just like, everything has to be scrapped this year. Everything's done. It's voided. We'll just start again next season. And those teams that qualify for the Champions League from the season before, you'll be in essentially like this season just didn't happen. And I know that's going to be hard for Liverpool fans, but it's the fairest and safest way to go ahead with this.
Yeah,
it's just to avoid the whole thing off and say, right, we'll just start again next year. Okay, easy starting point in September. There's not even a August even. There's not even a talk about trying to get seasons finished, and all the stress that must be going around with people that are in these positions trying to think of a strategic way to find grounds, find safe accommodations. It takes all that stress out. If UEFA just come out and said, we'll just void this year and we'll start again next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And the integrity part of it says that's the most simplest way of doing things. You know, you just pretend it didn't happen. However, of course, we know that there are differing views about, as we say, success, and people want that success, and that is associated to win the Premier League, qualifying for Europe. I mean, imagine if you told a Leicester City fan, you know, you're not going to be in the Champions League next year, having come as far as they have. It's a very, very grey area, and pleasing everyone is not going to be a case. So null and voiding it would also mean you're not going to please everyone. So, you know,
it's not about pleasing people, though, is it? It's about people's safety, and that's literally at this point the best way to go about it. And people will be annoyed with it, but if you're putting team glory over the health and well-being of the players, the non-playing staff, anyone involved in this, then where's the morality in that?
Yeah, I think there's two different strands there. There's the player safety and the people safety, the media, the club officials that will have to be at games even if they're behind closed doors. That's totally paramount, etc., etc. But you've got the argument of finishing a season or whether you null and void it and when you restart that season. So if you restart that season at a point where it's completely deemed safe to be having behind closed doors, events going on, we might see village cricket matches being able to be played at a smaller level, Bunyan centres being open, for example, in Bedford, where We can have netball games as long as nobody really comes into contact too much with people, because it's a non-contact sport. It can work in different ways. There's two strands there to when you restart a season. If it's this time next year, for example, and you just put calendar on hold, it's a different answer to the question.
I think as well that the financial side of football has an overbearing influence on all of this. For a number of different reasons. You've got clubs that need the TV revenue to survive, Burnley being one of them in the Premier League. And I think that's why Project Restart is having such a difficulty in coming together with the perfect plan, as it were. I mean, I'll just tell you a bit about something that I read this week about the plan itself. So it would essentially be 92 remaining games left over a 6-week period, officials being placed into lockdown, that's teams as well going into hotels, and each official would have to travel to the game in a sterile route. I mean, whatever that means. I mean, don't know if you guys know what that means, the sterile route. How do you do that? That's a big question. But it's not just that, it's the officials that have to be at the game, it's the media, it's the medical staff. That's a drain on resources that the NHS are going to need at the moment. Also, they're talking about players playing with masks on. Surely that's an immoral thing to be happening in a time when the NHS are short on personal protective equipment.
Well, I say we just go with the comical route. If they're gonna do this sterile route and face masks, let's just play the remaining games in team hazmat suits. let's do it. Let's put that out there. Okay, I want to know what people think about that. What, Aston Villa hazmat suit? Whoa.
To be honest, we'd probably defend better if we had a better suit on than what we're playing at the moment. So, it's a very interesting point. It's player safety, people's safety, and you're not just affecting just individuals here. And that's why, as I said, the humane side of the game needs to pipe up and realise that it cannot restart until situations like, is the NHS not under as much pressure anymore? We see on the graphs that the critical care beds dropping, but that doesn't obviously truly reflect the people that are going in with other symptoms, other heart attacks, strokes that are not being got through at the moment. All of that needs to be conducted. Unfortunately, every single time, it might just be PR spin on it, but every single time the Premier League has started by saying that the primary thought here is the country's situation, the world situation with regards to healthcare. And you do sense that they have no interest in starting this sooner than is realistically possible for whatever tests they've got in mind that they need to meet.
Oh, another big point as well, I mean, that I've thought about is, will the football that's being played be a fair representation of the quality that we're accustomed to in the Premier League? I mean, will it be as good because the players have been off for such a long period of time? They're talking about a 3-week pre-season before the games kick off, but still, I mean, the players are going to have that in the back of their mind. Psychologically, it's going to play on them as well. Are we going to see the Premier League as it is in this lockdown situation?
No, it's my opinion on that. No, definitely not. I mean, the Premier League is made up by its fans. It's made up of atmosphere. It's made up of full stadiums. We all as football fans look at certain clubs when they've not got full stadiums in the Premier League and you think, do they deserve to be there? We've had those conversations in the past. If you've not got a fan base, you're one of the biggest 20 clubs in the country. So I think losing that is a big problem. And again, we come down to the integrity of the competition. You've played, 75% of your fixtures in front of fit fans, which forms a different environment to play in. Take Villa, for example. We have 6 of our last 10 games at home. If we're playing on neutral ground, then all of a sudden we've played 2/3 of our games away from home in one way or another. So again, there is no right answer with regards to where you can go with that. But if you want to get the season done, you've got to look into these measures. But the most important thing with that is there are 20 representatives, probably chief executives or operations executives from clubs sitting on that Premier League board that will all agree that this is the way to move forward. Because if they don't agree, then there is no consensus. Therefore, the competition is not what everyone signs up for. So it has to be all agreed that we agree that behind closed doors is the best way to get the season done, and we accept that for this year that's the way it is.
Yep, that's pretty much it. Anyway, I think we should be moving on, okay, to the main focus of the podcast, which is looking at the non-league response, which is far more in Bedford Town's area. And I saw this week that the Premier League have announced that they were going to advance funds of in excess of £125 million to both the EFL and the National League non-league systems to help finance clubs in this time. It doesn't really say how that's going to be distributed. It just said 125 million. So it's a big number, but I don't know how that filters down. James, do you know how that filters down? Have you heard anything about this?
Because until the Premier League decide which route they're going to take, how much is going to the EFL, how much is going to the National League system, whether that goes into the FA to distribute out amounts to the National League system or whether it goes into individual leagues, is entirely, until that happens, we won't hear anything further with that. Okay,
so you haven't heard anything about it. It's just been... Oh, okay, that's good to know. It's like I say, it was just a blanket statement, but with no details of how that was being done. It's good that the Premier League are doing that in terms of money. I think there was pressure on them last week. I think Gary Neville brought it up in a Sky Sports News report that the Premier League should be filtering money down because they have the money to help a lot of the clubs that are on the brink right now to help them through this time. Because there was that story of Accrington Stanley possibly going bust if they had to play on behind closed doors or not play at all. But the National League system itself has been cancelled, hasn't it? As far as I'm aware, from steps. What did I read? Steps 3 down to 7. So
the steps 3 down to 7 have all ceased. There was an appeal from 66 clubs about that level going to the FA to say, look, we need to carry on. We've spent money trying to get promoted. We want to try and get promoted. We've got relegation battles, etc., etc. We would prefer to hold it and restart it when it was safe. That was rejected. So the decision was made for us by the FA that was to be held. And then the National League then went, what was it, about 10 days ago now, I don't know the exact date, but they then made the decision that they would not restart back up. But the National League is slightly different. They're still looking into how they can do promotion and relegation. That nothing's been confirmed, but there might be some kind of playoff system put in place. So you might have, for example, later in the summer, a one-off game between the bottom half of the National League and National playing the top half of the National League North-South to define a promotion like a one-off game. Like you see in Scotland when they play off against different divisions. Of course, that is complicated as well by the fact that we've got a position more to fill in the Football League by the Bury situation. So again, that rumbles on. If you don't fill that again, that's another year that's a problem.
It's really strange to think about how non-league teams are going to survive this, because you think of hearing about clubs like Burnley not being able to survive this, and then you think Bedford Town, and you think, well, they definitely don't have the revenue that some of these big teams. How has Bedford Town gone about going to survive this at the moment?
So we're obviously in a different situation in that we have a small pool of contracted players, and they are employees of the club like employees of any other business, so they need to be paid. But our non-contracted players, the players that play week to week and we agree a wage with them, they obviously haven't been playing, haven't been training, so we don't owe them any wage. So that side of things drops. But there is endless amounts of other bills: gas, electricity, water, security, insurance, league fees, all kinds of stuff which still have to be paid. So at the moment, we're fortunate enough that we had a little bit of a bank balance to still pay that. And our owners at the moment have been good enough to come forward and stump up some money to make sure we're ticking over. But again, it's an undefined period. We don't know how long this is going to go on for. And, project plan at the moment is definitely with clubs to get by week to week. There's no doubt about that. And other clubs are in that position. I saw Hitchin put out a massive appeal via social media this week to say they are struggling. They rent their ground from a group called the Cow Commoners. I believe there's been talks there as to whether they can have rent relief for a little while with regards to it, but there's all kinds of clubs that are very much struggling with where you're at.
Okay, so an interesting thing you just said there is you still having to pay league fees despite the leagues being cancelled. That's an interesting.
It's a massive debate, because if you null and void a season, it didn't take place. Therefore, you've paid for something that hasn't been completed. Fortunately, we pay league fees at the start of the season, so we've already paid those up front. But ordinarily, at this time of the year, we would be paying for 2020-2021. So we're waiting for that bill to come in, and we've not had any guidance from the league yet, whether that's going to be delayed because we don't know when we're starting, whether it's been waived, suspended. There's also the situation that the league has lost its sponsor through BetVictor, because obviously, they're not getting income in at the moment with there being no sport, so they've decided not to sponsor. So there's that hole in the league's finances. And little things like the FA, if it's null and void, then all the money that we've paid through suspensions, fines, is that null and void? And the FA have been clear to say no, that money will not come back to you.
Okay. I can understand some of what's been said, and some of it I like. In terms of league fee, I know you paid it up front, and obviously that's what most leagues do. But if you get to this point now where you're null and void, surely there should be some kind of rebate in place for the remaining of the season that hasn't been played. I feel like that's a fair. As for the suspensions thing, like there has been part of the season played, and I know you null and void it in terms of results of the season, but those games did happen for all intents and purposes. Those players were suspended, so I can see their stance on still wanting to take that money, but I feel like there should be a rebate program in place for league fees for the remaining part of the season. I think that's a fair point. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah. Do you think that maybe the Premier League money that is going to be filtered down the system will be covering those sort of costs? That's kind of what I would see the Premier League money being used for. That and general running of the club. It's difficult because 125 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you filter it through the Championship, League 1, 2, and then you get down to National League and then steps 3 to 7, how far is that money going to go? Like, how much are you realistically going to get? I mean, you've not even been told how much you're going to get, but I mean, how long's a piece of string? How much do you need to carry on, as it were?
Yeah, it's right down to the eligibility criteria and the fact of, is it an application process that we have to put in a case that we need X amount just to get by, and then is that fair that, for example, we've got maybe 10 grand of that grant and St. Neots get 25 grand of that grant? It all comes down to where you're going with that. How far it goes and how much we need is, again, it's dependent on how long this goes on for, because, if it's a longer period of time, then that's on a scale that goes up, because we've lost all forms of income. We've lost the match day income, but also the 7-day-a-week clubhouse income side of things. So there is literally, in terms of that, no income coming in through the football club, apart from the areas that we've been trying to raise in the meantime. Okay.
So just moving on now to Bedford Town itself, I just want to, for our listeners, I know that we'll have listeners who support Bedford Town, but we'll also have listeners who don't know about Bedford Town. So can you just tell us a little bit about your role, what you do at the club?
Yeah, so I'm club secretary. I took over in 2013 when the previous club secretary left. So I'm responsible for football administration and oversee kind of match day operations, so making sure that people are in the right place at the right time. Referees are contacted, opposition are contacted, any specifics of the game that go on. And obviously I've got other things in that I'm part of the supporters club that help run events and do stuff like that. And then on top of that, also have a massive part with the social media of the football club, so making sure that we raise profiles of that. And that's really grown in the last, should we say, 12 months. And we've got about 12,500 people that follow us on social media, and that's growing. And it's through, mentions like yourself and connecting into other local businesses and organisations that we're really benefiting in trying to grow the town.
Absolutely. And so in terms of COVID-19, how has the club adapted to the situation and carried on connecting with the fans since?
Yeah, so we've done a few things. We've raised a buddy scheme. So Lonely Eagles that are at home by themselves have been able to register, and some calls have gone out to check they're okay, and put in messages like that. The players have been obviously, contracted players that are still obliged to help us out, have been great in supporting us with little messages to go out online and stuff like that. So that's been really, really good. It's in terms of activity at the club, it's all gone very quiet because there's not really a lot we can do down there. There's still some people socially distancing working, so we've got some renovations being done, pitch work's being done at this time of the year, changing rooms are being redecorated and stuff like that. So there's odds and ends and bits and bobs like that going on. But in the grand scheme of things, from the club side of things, there's not an awful lot we can do apart from digital stuff.
Okay, so when COVID-19 was first announced and there was a lot of uncertainty about what was going on, what was the club's initial response to the crisis? And did you think it would impact the club as much as it has done when it was first announced that this had hit the UK?
The initial response was obviously it was a week-by-week thing. Our games were suspended for a week. Now, we all thought, we weren't going to be getting back to football before this point. Nobody had any thoughts that was going to happen. Once you go into a lockdown, you're there, and lockdown is there to protect people. So we didn't think there'd be any difference with that. But whilst you're in that week-by-week process, you've still got a plan. You've got to have hope that if the fixture is going to go ahead, we've got to be ready for it. So all the stuff was still going on week to week that, your fans don't see happens, the preparations for the games, the programmes, the organisation of fixtures was all going on whilst all that was in place. So from that side of things, the initial response was quite low. And then basically what we've done is we've ended up in a situation where everything's just kind of grounded to a halt because we can't do anything at the club. So we're just having to pay bills, fundraise as much as possible online and go from there with regards to it.
Right, and like you say, you have a pool of contracted players. When do you think the likelihood is that they'll be able to return to like training? Even no, I'm not even saying games, but
we operate differently to the Premier League, for example, whereby our contracted players are only contracted from August to May. So all of our non-contracted players are now gone. They are released from today. They can talk to other clubs. That's not a problem. Contracted players obviously are here and they will restart. But again, they are legally in bound from August to May. So if a season moves, we have a problem there because they're not able to play for us, say, December through to next August because they stop in May. The registrations all stop.
Okay, so that's going to have to be an issue that the FA are going to have to look into as well, surely, because I get that that's their contract, but because this is unprecedented, so surely the FA have to step in and say, right, for all intents and purposes, these contract boundaries have been moved ever so slightly. It's the only fair thing to do. Have you had any response from the FA in terms of them?
No, the FA have said that contracts remain the same, and this is the problem that the Premier League got, obviously, with a 30th of June deadline for the likes of Willian and Giroud and people like that as to where they're going with that. But no, there's been no guidance further to the FA, basically saying that that's where we're at the moment.
Wow, that's. I don't understand that response either. Like, how do they expect club like? They want to try and get seasons restarted where they can, but then they're not going to do the fair thing and try and move the parameters and tell players, look here, this is unprecedented, so you just have to go with it because this has never happened before. So it's the fair way to conclude the situation.
And hopefully they do end up in that situation. Hopefully they do. They might be waiting until we know we can have exact dates of the new seasons to be in place before they go and speculate and tell us to do this. But as things stand at the moment, no, nothing.
We've seen this week a few teams in the Premier League go back to training. Is there any realistic time frame to when Bedford Town players can start training again?
No, because we're done now. Our season is finished. There wouldn't have any playoff final would have been today, so they would have finished today anyway. So from our side of things, we're putting a pre-season programme in place that's penciled in. And then we'll look to meet at the end of June and start the pre-season training as normal. And obviously mid-June we'll assess if that's going to be possible.
So sorry, getting my words muddled up here. Do you think realistically you're going to be able to hit the end of June for getting players in to start training for next season. Do you think that that's a realistic time frame? Do you think you'll be allowed to do that?
I think there's social distancing training that will definitely be able to take place by then. I think we're going to have relaxed on that side of things. But whether we'll be able to have a full pre-season programme with supporters attending games in a pre-season, we don't know yet. It's too early to state that.
That brings me on to my next question. So obviously we've talked a lot about how this season will conclude, but let's talk about next season for a moment. If these guidelines, a lot of guidelines stay in place the next season, do you think even at the non-league level you'll be asked to play games behind closed doors? And what ramifications would that have for a club like Bedford Town?
I don't know whether we'll be asked to play games behind closed doors in that sense of the word. It will depend on what the guidance is. So, for example, if we have social distancing still in place, we will put a restriction down on how many people can attend games so that people can still stand 2 meters apart. So we'll have to work out via the ground's capacity, which we haven't done yet, obviously, for the sake of it's not a priority at the moment. In that situation, it will be that people have to buy tickets online, and then we only let those people in that have bought tickets online to the games. Whether it's behind closed doors gives us another headache because obviously we don't have any income then. So what are we paying players from when there's no income coming in? And therefore we'll be reliant on players basically playing for the love of the club. They'll have to play, potentially for free if that's what they want to do. And then that calls into question again, how much of an accurate, season are you getting with that?
Mm. Yeah, exactly. It's something that I've scratched my head about at the non-league level is just if this playing behind closed doors is implemented throughout all of football in England, just how does a non-league club deal with that? I was scratching. I think Sam was about to say something then as well on the situation.
Yeah, and just because obviously you're going to have to find funds from somewhere. So, I mean, is there anything that you are doing as a club to fundraise? Is there anything that the supporters can do to help you guys out?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that point, personally, my view would be if we were to vote, I wouldn't restart the seasons behind closed doors from an Eagles point of view. I mean, we are a community club for the benefit of the town. We don't get broadcast on TV. There's no benefit to us playing if we're not providing football for the local community. So if we had a choice between starting the season playing behind closed doors or restarting in January with a new season, then I'd vote for the latter because it's for the benefit of the people of the town. That's why we do it. With regards to fundraising, yes, we've had some great efforts. We've had donation pages, so people have been donating what they would have spent on the days at fixtures, so when they've been going to games, which has been good. And people have been commenting, saying, I want to donate to the club, but there's no way of doing that. So setting up that through the online ticketing sites worked well. We had a 50-50 draw where we donated some stuff back to the NHS. We raised over £500 for the Bedford Hospitals NHS Trust. So that's really, really good. And we also had a situation last night where we did a quiz night, which went down really well on Facebook Live. That's still available now, so people can go on and play that at their own speed. There are no problem at all. And people paid via the online ticket site to join that, so we raised money that way. So there's different ideas coming in of how we can keep fundraising going, but we're doing our best in times. But there's no way you make that kind of money that you do the match days and clubhouse events. You would just lost that.
So is there anything in the future that you're doing? Have you got any more plans for future fundraising that you'd like to sort of raise awareness about?
No, not at the moment. We've got our little things going on like end of season voting. So the Supporters Club, you can now go online and vote for your Supporters Club Player of the Year. We've decided to charge £2 for this in the hope that many people could donate £2 for a vote instead. We wouldn't normally charge for it, but that's a different way of doing it. And if anyone's got any ideas, by all means, they can contact us through social media about how we can do this. It's a learning curve for us all because ordinarily we have our quiz nights down at the club and enjoy good social evenings. We don't want to go the digital route in the first place, so it's a learning curve for us all.
And just finally to wrap the podcast up, I just want to ask about your favourite memory of Bedford Town Football Club.
So yeah, three points with this really. To be honest, the first one would be when we went up at Chippenham to gain promotion to the Conference South in the 89th minute with a 25-yard effort. It was a mad day, brilliant. Everyone who was involved in that will remember that. It was a carnage evening as well. Really, really enjoyable. Other things that stand out was our FA Trophy run of last year, playing at Aldershot when we came back from twice to get a 3-3 draw. That was an incredible day out in the rain. And finally, my best part of memory of being Bedford Town is all the years of knowing people that have changed my life, that I've socialised with and spent time with. Obviously, a number of them that are no longer with us, they've passed on. But the best part about the club is definitely the friendship, the social circle that we have, and people that you can rely on. And that's really been key in these times. We've all got WhatsApp groups, we've all got Zoom parties going on. We're trying to keep in touch with each other, and that's the good. It's a community club run for the benefit of the town by the people who live in the town, and that's my best part in the club.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time for today. This has been great. Thank you, James, for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate that. Good luck to you in Bedford Town. Everyone, please go and check them out on social media and do what you can to help Bedford Town Football Club.